In this video, we're going to be doing a breakdown and review of the Rheem Heat Pump lineup. We're going to be covering everything from their single stage and two stage systems up to their inverter line, their side discharge lines, as well as their communicating systems and more. We're going to talk about which systems qualify for a heat pump tax credit. There's currently some tax credits available as well as some local utility rebates, but more on that in a second. And before we get started, if you haven't done so already, please make sure you smash that like button for the algorithm and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. We put out daily and weekly content on how you can get the best HVAC for your home. So if you've just started shopping for your HVAC system replacement and you haven't done so already, consider subscribing to the channel because we do put out daily and weekly content on how you can get the best HVAC for your home. We do deep dives on system reviews. And if you're working on a particular product or project, tell us what you're working on in the description. If you have questions, we're more than happy to chime in where we have expertise and provide some feedback. So thanks again for doing that. And let's just get started by diving in and giving you kind of a high level overview of some of the products that are available through Rheem. Now, right now I have their website pulled up on my screen and I'll just be going through. There's a lot of systems that we're not going to be reviewing. And the reason is some of these systems, as you can see right here, instead of saying SEER 2, they say SEER. And what that means is this is a SEER 1 system. So this is actually being replaced by the newer SEER 2 system. And a lot of them are identical. They're just newer, or they're very similar. But the difference is that a SEER 2 system, in order for it to the way that the testing was done, is it's a more accurate reflection of field conditions that we see in terms of ductwork constraints. We talk about this in a lot of videos, but basically it's based on, SEER 1 was based on a 0.1 inches of water column static pressure, whereas SEER 2 is based on 0.5 inches. And all that means is that it's a more accurate reflection of how efficient a system is when we actually install it in someone's home. Because the truth is we never find homes that have a 0.1 inch water column static pressure, because 80% of homes in North America have an undersized ductwork. And so we're always dealing with less than ideal ductwork conditions. And so SEER 2 ratings are actually a more accurate reflection of how efficient a system will be once we install it in your home versus how efficient it is in theory in the lab. So that's what that means. And so that's why we're not going to be reviewing all these systems. But just to kind of dive in and talk about the different levels. So you basically have a few different tiers. You have the Select series, which is kind of your baseline. So if you look at anything and it says Select series, this is going to be your single stage options, and this is going to be your options that are kind of just like your base models. You can see the difference here between this system, these two systems, is just the SEER 2 ratings are a little bit higher on this 14AY, which is it has an EER2 rating that's a little bit higher. SEER stands for seasonal energy efficiency ratio. EER stands for energy efficiency ratio. And the difference is that SEER is based on peak performance in the peak season. And so, how something performs in peak cooling conditions. And then if we look at HSPF2, that stands for heating seasonal performance factor. And the reason that's relevant is that's required for some of these systems to qualify for tax credits. And if you go over here, again, I'll make sure to link these links. Everything I'm talking about here will be linked in the description for your convenience. I'll link Rheem's, heat pumps so you can see them. And then I'll also link the Energy Star website as well, which is where you can find out the tax credit eligibility on which systems actually qualify. Now, your local contractor, whoever you're working with, should know which systems qualify and be able to guide you through that. But basically you can see we have the Prestige series, Classic Plus, more Prestige series, more Classic series, Versus, and then this is the RHP XZS is a package unit. So that's going to be a rooftop unit, the boxes that you see on the roof. And this is really only relevant in certain parts of the country. In Phoenix, they still use a lot of package units. So if you're considering a package unit, we're actually not going to talk about those today in this channel, but we can do. If that's something you want to see, let us know in the comment section below and we'll put out a specific video on those package units. Now, diving into, just to go into this a little bit more, if you click on any of these where it says tax credit eligible, it's going to take you to this page right here where it talks about that heat pump tax credit that's up to $2,000. And as you can see, the blue states here, the eligibility of equipment varies from the north to the south. These northern climates are more geared towards heating demands. And so the heat pump that you're picking out, if it qualifies for a tax credit in the north, that means it's a cold climate heat pump and it meets the requirements necessary in order to be categorized that way. And so when you look at these, you'll see that some of these, like for example, this particular Prestige series says it's a cold climate heat pump. The cold climate, it's not going to be all systems that qualify. So in this system, it looks like heating capacity, it says it's 29,000 BTUs. So if I had to guess, that's their 3-ton system that is qualifying based on that metric is my guess. So it's not all systems qualifying just because it says tax credit eligible. As you can see, the cooling capacity, it says 34,200 BTUs, so it's about 3 tons of cooling. So that in this instance, this particular system that qualifies for the tax credit as well as the cold climate tax credit is really only going to be eligible on that 3-ton model. And that's because of what's called an AHRI matchup, which has to do with how efficient each individual system is. Just so you know, this page isn't the most accurate. I don't have time to go through every single model because it's actually going to be pretty complex, but if you click on this explore models on this next page here, which is on that tax credit eligibility, you can literally type in Rheem, for example, and it will pull up every single system, manufactured by Rheem, and it'll tell you if it's eligible in the South. As you can see, all these systems are South eligible, and there's 3,000 matchups because this is going to be Rheem is the manufacturer, so this is going to be all the Rheem products, but there's going to be a matchup if it has a different furnace, like this is a 2-stage furnace, this is a different air handler or condenser coil, and so the coil that goes inside on top of your furnace is the indoor portion of your air conditioning, and depending on, there's literally, as you can see, countless matchups, in this case 3,000, various combinations. So if you're trying to find out if something particular matches up, whichever contractor you're working with should know that and be able to verify that prior to installation. And just because the equipment qualifies doesn't necessarily mean you qualify. That just has to do with tax credit eligibility. So ask your CPA to verify that first if you're really banking on that tax credit. Most people will qualify. It's pretty universal. But again, that's going to be a little bit different in terms of there's system eligibility and then there's personal eligibility. Now, as far as, heat pump tax credits aside, let's talk about actually how to, assuming there was no credits, which system is actually best for you. And I'll give you kind of a high level overview of systems in general from all manufacturers of what's out there so that you can kind of pick out what sounds best to you, and then we'll go from there. So basically on the lower end, you have your basic entry level system is going to be what's called a single stage system. Single stage, what that means is that it's basically either on or it's off. And so any of these select series options like this 14AZ, this system, the 14AZ, is going to be a 2-stage system actually, but this is the Endeavor line. If we look at the WP14AZ, this is the single stage system. But so the difference between, the WP and the RP is that one is a single stage system and one is a 2-stage system. Now, in terms of efficiency changes or what's going to be the big difference, you can see that the efficiency doesn't change a whole lot. You have, and same with the sound rating. So this is, this is a single stage system that runs at as low as 72 decibels. The SEER2 rating is 14.3. The EER rating is 10.4. HSPF2, which is your heating seasonal performance factor, that's a heat pump metric, so how the system performs in heating, was at 7.6. But if we look at this 2-stage system, we can see that the HSPF2 rating, even as a 2-stage system, it's identical. It's 7.6, 10.4, 14.3. So the biggest difference is that you have stages, and the sound rating doesn't really change either, right? This still says as low as 72 decibels. So the benefit of a 2-stage system is it comes down to comfort, but it's a moderate increase in comfort. It's also going to be a little bit more efficient, but basically a single stage system is either on or it's off. A 2-stage system is a moderate increase in that it's running at 50% capacity, ballpark, so it's a rough estimate. It's actually going to vary manufacturer to manufacturer, but it'll come on at 50% capacity as first stage, and then second stage is 100% capacity. The benefit of these systems is they are a little bit simpler to work on in terms of we stock a lot of the components to repair these parts, systems on our truck, because it's a legacy style of system when compared to an inverter or communicating system. But the benefit of these systems is they're going to be a little bit lower price point, and they're going to be a little bit simpler technology. So if you live in a moderate climate, and I'll define moderate as the temperature goes from the lows of 40 degrees, highs of 90 degrees or something, or 95, maybe it hits 100 a few days out of the year, then something like this might work for you if you don't have a very demanding climate where you really need to maximize efficiency. If you have lower energy bills, that can vary from person to person in terms of how you define a low energy bill, but I would say if your bill's less than $100 a month or less than $150 a month, this might be an option for you because efficiency savings just might not be there on the higher end systems to really get a payback period where you're going to save some money. Now, if we jump up to some of these other systems like the RP15AZ, you can see this is also a 2-stage system, but the biggest difference is that this has a higher HSPF2 rating, a higher EER2 rating, and a higher SEER2 rating. So the system is more efficient. And again, we're still in two-stage territory, so this is what's called, a legacy system. And then if we look at, any of the inverters, once we get into something that's EcoNet enabled like this RP16AZ system, what is, an inverter? What does EcoPlus enabled mean? Well, when you read through here, just a few things at a glance, you'll notice right off the bat. SEER2 rating is substantially higher. We're up at 17 now. EER2 rating is 10.4, and the HSPF2 rating is at 8.1. So all around, it's more efficient. And then the sound rating is the most noticeable difference anytime you jump to an inverter product. This system says it's as low as 60 decibels, so it's substantially quieter, and this is an inverter-driven variable speed system. That's why it's going to be more efficient. So what does that mean? What does a variable speed inverter system mean? Well, a variable speed, if a single stage system is either on or off, think of a variable speed system as being able to ramp up in multiple stages. So a variable speed system is going to have a compressor that can run at multiple speeds. It could be running at 20% capacity, then 30, then 40, then 50. And so the benefit of these systems is, number one, they're quieter. That's just in my opinion. I really value quiet and comfort from a HVAC perspective in terms of what's going to make your home more comfortable. And then the other thing to consider is that it's more efficient. So, right, if you have a higher energy bill and you're looking to save some money on a monthly basis, having an inverter is going to save you money by comparison with a single stage system. And an added benefit, again, is that it's going to be quieter. Now, what about some of these other systems like this? Why would you go with a side discharge system, and what are the difference between these two? Now, if you just look at the title here, it kind of tells you. This says cold climate, sound and space constraint solution. This particular model is one of the cold climate eligible heat pumps. Now, there's only certain tonnages that qualify, so it's not all tonnages, so keep that in mind. But you can see, again, if you want to come in here and verify which particular matchup qualifies, you'll see which systems, meet that eligibility requirement. But the big thing is that this is a cold climate heat pump. The SEER2 rating is higher on this, 18.8 SEER2. The EER2 rating is a little higher, and the HSPF2 rating jumps up to 10.4, and it comes in 2.5, 3, and 4 ton. And one of the benefits of these systems, aside from that, is also, it says in the title, sound and space constraint. This is going to be the quietest solution. So these systems are always quieter than even this system that goes down to 60 decibels. This particular system will be as low as 50 or even lower. It's a very quiet system. Side discharge systems by default are typically going to be quieter systems. One of the benefits of these systems also is that you have tighter clearance requirements. So that means you might only need 3 or 4 inches of clearance on, the back to still be able to get the needed airflow. I believe that's what this particular system advertises. It says 21 inches on 3 sides. So basically a combination of, how that adds up. So on multiple sides, you are able to have, reduced clearances. And so if you have tight lot lines, like if you live in the city or a metropolitan area and you just don't have a lot of space for a big condenser, these can be awesome for that reason because they're so quiet. Be nice if you spend a lot of time outside in the summer and your AC is kicking on and off. This is going to be a quieter solution to where you don't hear it when you're playing in the backyard with the kids or having a barbecue or something along those lines. So that's just something to consider if I was choosing what system to put in my home compared to, all of these systems. I always prefer side discharge systems just because they are quieter. Now, the difference again between these two systems is going to come down to tax credit eligibility and performance in different climates. So the cold climate version is going to be better, obviously, in, colder climates. If you need heating performance that keeps up in really cold weather, this Rheem system, I believe it's advertised that it keeps up down to negative 22 degrees Fahrenheit, which is impressive. If you look through the literature, it gives performance data down to negative 15 degrees Fahrenheit. So this system keeps up quite well. We do a deep dive on it in another videos. I'll make sure to link that at the end if you're curious to watch it. But it's a great product, especially in a cold climate. So that is a product that I would consider. We're going to talk about, this RP18Z AZ series here in a second. But before we do that, if you haven't done so already, again, please consider subscribing to the channel if you're finding this content helpful so far. It takes a lot of time and energy to put out content like this, so if you find this helpful, subscribing to the channel is a free way you can show your support, and it is much appreciated. So the RP18AZ Endeavor line, the difference between this system is this is just high-end, top-of-the-line inverter. So this is also an inverter system. You can see that the SEER2 rating jumps up to 20, so this is 20 SEER2, 12.5 on the EER rating. However, as you can notice, the HSPF2 factor, or the heating seasonal performance factor, drops to 8.5 compared to that side discharge system. The sound rating drops to 58 decibels, so this is still more efficient than that RP16 version that we looked at earlier. It's also an inverter system, and one of the things that you're going to get with these inverters that is going to be a benefit compared to any of the single stage systems we've talked about earlier, or two-stage systems, is that all of these inverter systems actually pair with an electronic expansion valve. Now, if you're not familiar with what that is or what an EXV is, I'll pull up an electronic expansion valve so that you can see. But an electronic expansion valve is what controls the flow of refrigerant into your evaporator coil. Now, your system has basically, when it's a standard, this is a picture of a standard TXV, for example, and this is a thermostatic expansion valve. And the way that this works is this little bulb right here sits on your suction line, and basically it opens and closes to allow refrigerant into your coil. But this is just a basic TXV. And the benefit of an EXV or something like this, an electronic expansion valve, is that it is a communicating system. So when we looked at some of these systems earlier, and you see some of the terminology like EcoNet enabled or communicating systems, that means that system can pair with an indoor air handler or indoor coil that has an electronic expansion valve. And what the benefit of that is when that system first kicks on, it opens and closes, allowing a precise amount of refrigerant into your indoor coil. The benefit is that your compressor and your indoor unit are now working in unison, and that's part of how it's maximizing efficiency. So number one, you're going to save money, and that's how that becomes a more efficient system. But number two, it's actually better at cooling or heating, in that sense that it's more accurate when it first kicks on, and so it's maximizing heat removal or heat transfer, which is what the air conditioning is. It's just heat transfer through the refrigerant. And in the summer, we take heat from inside the home and send it outside through the refrigerant, and then in the winter we pull heat from outside and put it into the refrigerant and send it inside. And so an electronic expansion valve is just an added comfort feature that makes the system more comfortable, quieter, more efficient, and better at operating. And so this is one of the biggest selling points on those high-end systems, is that you do get a system that has an electronic expansion valve. Now, that being said, which system should you get, right? How do we boil this all down to determine what is the best system for your particular region? Now, obviously, there's going to be a few questions that you're going to ask yourself. And again, a local contractor in your region will be able to identify what's best for your specific situation. But the things that we always ask our customers is, how long do you plan on staying in the home? That's kind of our first question. The reason is if you don't plan on staying in the home that long, you're not really going to get enough time to recoup the costs on a HVAC replacement. And so going for a lower end model, or maybe you don't get the cheapest inverter or the cheapest, single stage system, maybe you go for a two-stage system, but I wouldn't spend the money on a higher end system, because you're just not going to be able to recoup those costs in the long run if you're planning on moving soon. So that's something to keep in mind. But if you plan on staying in the home for a while, going for a system that's going to if maximizing comfort is important to you, then it might make sense to go for those high-end systems. And that brings me to consideration number two, which is comfort. How important is it to you to have a quiet system? How important is it to you to have a system that is more economical and efficient to operate? If you're the type where you are gone often and you're out of town and you don't really use your HVAC that much, or you're just, like I said, you're always out of town on the weekends, or you get home late from work, then having, that high-end system might not be as important to you. Or maybe the opposite is true. Maybe right now your system is noisy and it keeps you up at night, and so you want that quieter system, because that's going to, when you get home from a long day of work, the one thing you want to enjoy is just a nice quiet HVAC system. And so those are some of the considerations, right? Because at the end of the day, it really boils down to comfort and efficiency. There's not a one size fits all. So that's why all the manufacturers offer multiple product lines, obviously, is because people want different things. And so depending on, we get people that contact us from the channel for getting an estimate for system replacement all the time, and they'll they'll ask us lots of different questions about like what types of systems they should get. And we sell everything from the basic single stage system all the way up to the high-end inverters and multi-port systems where we're putting in, zoned heating and cooling. So it really just depends on what's most important to you. And then when it comes to choosing the right system for your particular region, a local contractor is going to know which systems to recommend, because if you're in a heating oriented climate, like we're based in Denver, Colorado, and we also have a branch in Phoenix, Arizona, we have different recommendations for each of those branches, because obviously in Phoenix it's very hot, and so people are more concerned with how a system performs from a cooling perspective. And so we tend to go with the higher end inverter systems that can keep up in those climates. And then in Colorado, people are more concerned with cold weather performance. We do get, hot summers here, but it's hit or miss, and it does normally cool down at night. It's not as critical as a heating market or a place like, Dallas, Texas, where the summers can be hot and humid. And so it's kind of a double whammy. So the bottom line is talk to a local contractor, because they're going to be able to give you specific advice based on your specific situation as well as your specific region. And if you happen to be in the market for HVAC system replacement, or if you just recently moved and you need a permanent HVAC company to take care of your regular maintenance and service, click the link in the description below to be connected with a local contractor in your area. We've actually teamed up with a handpicked group of contractors nationwide that maintain the highest customer service ratings on Google, as well as technical excellence. So if you've watched this show and you thought, wow, I'd really like to work with these guys, but it's too bad that they only service a few select areas, I feel you. And that's why we've decided to partner with the best local contractors nationwide in your area, some of which have even been featured on our show. This way, you can find a contractor that's familiar with the latest technology, whether that's cold weather heat pumps or inverter-driven heat pumps that work well on battery backup or solar or in-floor radiant heat or any other technology that's specific to your climate or your region. We're partnering with those contractors. So click the link in the description to request an appointment with us or with a vetted HVAC Dope Show contractor in your area. And as mentioned earlier, there's a few videos popping up on the screen right now that talk about heat pump efficiency ratings, as well as a few other videos that YouTube thinks you should watch. So make sure you check those out if you haven't done so already, and we will catch you on the next episode.